Hello, this is Jasmine, and I need to preface this that I know the first 3 minutes of this video are a little grainy. I recorded it before I really knew what I was doing with the software. That being said, I'm really happy with how this turned out. This was a gift art piece for a friend on Tumblr that I started ages ago and only recently finished during a live stream on Twitch. Her name is Cinnamon Suncat on Tumblr. That's cinnamon-suncat. And this character is named, and I have no idea if I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Syrena Khalid. She is awesome and she does a lot of really adorable sketches and art. Her whole blog is mostly FFXIV, that's Final Fantasy XIV related, and that's how I found it. I'll leave a link to her down below. Okay, so about the art itself, I was really inspired to do a dancing piece with a lot of movement and life, because that's what initially drew me to the character. I laid in a simple desert background with gradients and textured brushes. The sky is a simple gradient, keeping in mind that the horizon is the lightest part of the sky, even at night. After the base colors for the mountains, I went in with a small dark brush, then added larger, more general shadows before moving on to highlights. Sadly, the little tree in the background would be covered by the main subject, so I didn't bother coloring it. To paint the background, I made a light to dark gradient towards the horizon because I decided early on that I wanted this piece to be a nighttime scene in front of a fire, but that I didn't actually want the whole fire visible. I then used a textured brush to lay a lot of overlapping horizontal lines that got smaller and less defined as they reached the horizon. I also brought out some vague dark shapes to later be turned into rocks and scrubby bushes. I kept everything desaturated, even at the highlight stages. I took screenshots of my own Final Fantasy XIV character in the sort of area and lighting that I wanted to help with color and background reference. I also used several reference photos for the figure itself, one for the main pose and another to help me figure out the anatomy for her back leg. For the skin, I laid in base colors for everything and then duplicated that, adjusting the colors for a nighttime scene, and used my eraser to scrub away parts of this new darker layer, showing the warmer color beneath where the light from the fire would touch. After I finish carving out those highlights, I adjust the background a little more to make sure that the colors complement each other well and that I have a really solid color palette. I also add some firelight to the ground and surrounding brush and rocks. When I went in to paint the details, I used a low opacity standard round brush and simply went directly over the base colors. I felt this would add a more natural look to the skin by adding more hues to the mix. I first blocked in lights and shadows and defined the edges a bit more. This process can take some time and is a bit tedious, so I'd recommend having a cleaner base layer to begin with than I did. To make sure that the edges aren't too harsh, I usually use a hard round brush on a medium opacity or a very small fuzzy brush. Everything I do in this painting is with standard Photoshop brushes, and I'm sure that there are equivalent brushes in a free program such as GIMP. And also, let me know if there's anything in this video that you'd like to see in an in-depth tutorial on, since I'm going over just my basic process here. I worked with the colors I already had down, but I also threw some of the red tones from her outfit onto her skin, hair, and tail, as well as some of her skin tone onto her outfit. This gives the appearance of bounce lighting when I smooth everything out and looks really nice. For her hair and tail, I use a bit smaller of a brush because I want a more textured look as opposed to the smooth look of her body and cloth. I'll still blend it out a bit in the end because I want a nice flowy feel. So it's less about individual strands here and more about showing separate locks. This is also where I define her ears and tail, using the same method. She has these amazing big caracal ears, and I really wanted to accentuate the dark tufts of fur at the ends and make her tail look long and fluffy too. Lastly, I began to smooth everything out with the smudge tool, adding more highlights and shadows where needed, and then blending them out. This is also the way I worked with charcoals, first laying in rough values and then smudging them around to get a more polished look, and I love the painterly feel that it gives to my digital art. It's probably how pastels work too, but I've never used them, so I don't really know. So I keep blending, adding more color, and redefining until I have everything exactly where I want it. Using the smudge tool is a great way to create very smooth, vibrant skin, but you want to try not to overblend things. The whole point is to have some of that color showing through. Here it is yellow that will echo the gold of her paint in the final piece, but if I was painting a forest scene, I would add greens and browns to give the piece more life, as well as having the character's color in bits of the surroundings. So the key is being able to tell just how much to blend, but you can always add colors back in or even fix your shadows and highlights as you go, which I did in several places here. It's just really fun, like mixing paint around. Be careful if you use this tool on hair or fur though, and pay attention to the direction of the strokes. You don't want your strands of hair to get smudged the wrong direction. When I paint the face, I use the same technique, but I go in with smaller brushes so that I can get the darkest areas in place early on and then build up the forms around them. I usually lay in the shape of the eyes, nostrils, and line of the mouth first. Building up the layers of the face is one of my favorite things, and this character has a very pretty and very distinct features, so it was a chance for me to practice drawing lips and eyes specifically of a shape different to what I normally do. I like to draw different facial structures every chance I get, but it can be really hard getting out of that comfort zone. I used references drawn by Cinnamon Suncat, as well as a photo of the character's face claim. But since the photo wasn't at the exact same angle, expression, or lighting, I had to rely on my general knowledge of the face to get me by. I think it looks quite a bit like her in the end, but it went through a lot of changes, especially in the nose, which is a weak point for me. If you are drawing a character with a clear reference or from a photo, remember to pay close attention not only to the main details, but to finer points such as the shape of the eyebrows and nose, as well as the distance between the features, because these smaller details really help to make your character rendition recognizable, and it's far too easy to fall into the trap of drawing your go-to looks in there instead. One of the last things I do is add her golden paint, which personally was my favorite part. This was so fun and therapeutic to do as the paintings change from day to day, so I didn't have to go for any sort of accuracy here. It was a lot like when I used to doodle on my papers at school. I knew that she was left-handed, so I was going to put the paint primarily on her right side, and I did that with her body, but I really wanted to paint her hand, and the right one was hidden. So I just went with it and I painted her left hand. I'm really glad that I did, because I really loved the way that it turned out. The markings themselves are vaguely nature inspired, vine like swirls, leaf and spiderwebbish shapes. I also added a lot of dots with the idea of it looking almost like fine gold chains hanging down. These kinds of patterns are so fun for me, and I adore how it turned out. So I may do some more body paint inspired illustrations in the future. Her thigh has a large sun-shaped painting in reference to her being a seeker of the sun. Final touches were to add some more blue shadows and orange highlights on another layer, and then a couple color tweaks and adding the flames and sparks in the foreground. But unfortunately, I had ended the stream, so that very last part didn't get recorded. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please hit the like button. It helps me out so much by making my videos more visible on YouTube. And if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. I don't have a set in stone schedule at the moment, but I'm going to try to get a video up each week. Thanks for stopping by.